Welcome to the demonstration of how to make a cervical pack. This is like a very simplified version of how to make them. There's like much more intensive like processes where you're making like a tea and then you're stirring the powder into the tea, but it feels like a lot for people to do multiple times a week. So this is a very simple one that I think is still effective. And this recipe really comes from my teacher Lyndon, and the suppository recipe really came from my teacher Lyndon and Betsy. So here is the powders we're going to use. You can play around with different powders. You could also use turkey tail powder. That would be a great one to use in a cervical pack. You could use chaga powder if that felt really indicated. You could do calendula powder, marshmallow root powder. You can really like figure out what fits for you. But we're gonna do around 5 grams of these two herbal powders and then 1 gram of Japanese matcha. Normally you would weigh it out, but I'm just gonna go with like the rough estimate of 1 teaspoon being equal to 1 gram. So what I'm going to do is 3 teaspoons of turmeric powder and 2 teaspoons of Oregon grapefruit powder, and then I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of Japanese matcha powder. Okay. So we're going to do the 3 teaspoons of that one. And yeah, I would recommend at home, if you have a way you can weigh it out to see how many teaspoons each is in grams. So you could weigh out like 3 grams of turmeric powder and then measure that in teaspoons for that specific powder that you have, and then you can just go with that from then on if that's easier. Okay, I was just wiping off my teaspoon. So now we're going to do 2 teaspoons of Oregon grapefruit powder. I'm going to come over here and wipe it off. We're going to do 1 teaspoon of the matcha. You can also do less than 1 teaspoon, especially if you have like sleep issues and you're worried it might affect your sleep. It really shouldn't. But if you have any concern about it, you could start with like 1/4 teaspoon or even 1/8 of a teaspoon and then work your way up to 1 teaspoon if that felt good. Or you could just stay at like a smaller amount of the matcha powder, and that's totally fine too. All right, so I'm stirring the powder up. And then we're going to do 2 milliliters of thuja tincture, which is 2 dropperfuls. And again, you could do, if thuja didn't seem exactly indicated, you could do a different tincture, but it's essentially 2 milliliters of tincture. So we're going to just do 2 big dropperfuls. And then I have a little bit of filtered tap water over here. So I'm going to start adding it. This is sort of, you need to kind of like feel it out, but there's 1 teaspoon. And you're sort of just looking to make a paste. So it's a little bit subjective. You don't want it to be totally dry and crumbly, but if it's too wet, you're going to have a hard time holding it in the menstrual disc or using a diaphragm to keep it against the cervix. So you want to kind of find a good medium where it's enough of a paste that it will hold together. So that's looking really good for me. To me, I kind of tend to use my fingers to make sure it's the right texture. I would definitely recommend using filtered water, not tap water unless you really know your tap water is good. So I had done 2 teaspoons, I'm going to do 1 more teaspoon. Just very going to mix it up with my fingers. Yeah, so that's looking like a really good consistency to me. So it's a paste, it's sort of holding together. Yeah, it's going to hold its shape, not crumbly or dry, but not so wet that it's going to have liquid leaking out. And then once you have this paste, you would take the menstrual disc, which I will include different links to different options, but you basically just put the paste into the disc and then fold up the disc and insert it. Usually lying down is best, but it's pretty easy, so it can be a nice option for topical applications.